Brain. This is the way the human brain works. The human brain is a program, and the way the program is designed, it's a survival program. And in order for it to work, it has to be able to detect something threatening. It has to be able to detect threats. And so the way threats occur, the way threats appear to the brain is something's wrong, something's not right, something's out of kilter, you know. Now, the brain, the way the brain's programmed, it's designed to make they call it a type 1 error and a type 2 error. One of those, I always get confused about which one is which, but one of those errors is that you saw a beige image in your field of vision, and you thought it was an animal that was going to attack you, but it was just a rock. That's one type of error, that you mistook something that wasn't dangerous to be dangerous. The other error is that you saw something that was beige in your field of vision, and you thought it was a rock, and it was an animal that was about to eat you. That's the other error, right? So the way the brain is programmed is to make the first error, right? In other words, the way the brain's programmed, I may be wrong 9 out of 10 times, but I'm still alive. You see?
So error on the side of caution.
That's right. So you better that you should consider everything a threat than consider nothing a threat, right? If you consider everything a threat, that's how the brain operates, right? Which means you'll survive, but you'll be scared a lot because you'll be mistaking everything to be a threat, right? This is why when we're in relationships to people who we love and they behave a certain way and the brain registers a threat, all of a sudden the person who you love and who loves you is perceived as the enemy. And anger comes up, right? And you want to fight. You either want to withdraw, you know, the fight, flight, or freeze mechanism plays, and you either want to run away from them or attack them. And of course, we're a lot more sophisticated than a lot of the animals in the jungle, so the way we could withdraw, right, is just to be silent and not talk to the person for 10 years. Right? That's the way the brain is. It's just playing a program. It's not conscious, you know, it's not conscious, it's just playing a program. And the program is designed to have you survive. It doesn't care if you're happy, by the way. That's irrelevant, right? It's a survival program. And unless you can see the program instead of be the program, your life will be the life of most human beings, which will mean that you'll go through your life afraid all the time, right? It's a fear-based operation, right? It's a fear-based operation. So that means that all the time your body has to be in a certain degree of tension, right? Because everything's a threat, right? And then as you go through, you're looking for threats of any sort, right? And because of the generalized program, you know, that anything could threaten me, right? Anytime anything happens that seems to stifle you or seems to block you or seems to get in your way, is this starting to sound familiar? Yeah. You get upset, right? Therefore, if you drive a car, you're upset a lot, right? Because one of the ways that the traffic occurs, if you look, you can see this. One of the ways that people drive cars is very similar to the way they live their lives, but they don't make the connection, right? So when you're on the highway, this occurred to me the other day, I thought it was funny. You're part of the human race. When you're driving a car, it's literally a race. The human is racing, right? Because when you're on the highway, just notice, everybody's racing. It's a race. And even if when you get to the red light, the person who sped around you going 10 times above the speed limit, he still stopped there with you when you come to the red light, right? But as soon as that light changes, the race is on. The race is on, right? And if you actually were to interview somebody who was in the race and say, where are you racing to? I got to get home. Oh, you got to get home. And if you get home 10 minutes later than now, what will happen? Oh, that's irrelevant. I just got to get home. Because everybody is conditioned, to be in a race. It's competitive. It's competitive. Your mind's a competition machine, right? Even if you don't see it consciously, if you see it consciously, it's disgusting. But even if you don't see it consciously, that's what's running all the time. When you walk around in the world and you look at other human beings, your brain is working all the time. Is that person smart or stupid? Are they beautiful or are they ugly? Do I like them? Do I not like them? Are they going to hurt me or are they not going to hurt me? Right? This is going all the time at a level below your consciousness. And if the person acts in a certain way that is clear enough, right, then all of a sudden it goes into, the fight or flight or freeze mode. Because in the present moment, who you think you are doesn't exist. Therefore, in the present moment, when you're being in the present moment and paying attention to your breath and the personality isn't there because you have to think to be the person, right? That starts to set off, programming. Restlessness is the way it starts. It starts to set off programming like something's wrong here. I don't know if I'm really here. Right? You're not saying that, right? But the you that you're used to being isn't getting generated. The you that you're used to being is being generated by thinking. And the practice that we're practicing, the methodology that we're using is to train you to experience not thinking. Like it's a real possibility. Most human beings go through their entire life and they never discover that it's possible not to think. So you're training yourself to discover not thinking. And when you're not thinking, the personality that you thought you were isn't there. So right away it starts to become like, oh, what's going on, right? And so even when if you say what's going on, that's thinking already, you see? So the default mode for human beings is to think, right? And then worse than that, the default human beings is to think, and when there's nothing to think about that's practical and necessary, right? What do you think about?
Past and future.
Yes, but more than that. What do you think of? What do you think of it? Do you think about me?
No, yourself.
Yes, you think about you, right? So the default mode, and they actually measure this in the brain activity, right? The neuroscientists measure this in the brain activity. The default mode, when you don't have to think about something that's necessary, that's practical, like you don't have to think, to cook food or drive a car, whatever the case may be. Even when you're driving a car, because the body and the brain learn to drive the car, you really don't have to be there for it, right? So you can go into default mode when you're driving the car, right? And in default mode, the thoughts are always only about you. How do I feel? What do I want? What happened yesterday? What's going to happen tomorrow? How do I get more of what I want? How do I get less of what I don't want? And all of that. And then you react to your own thinking, don't you? Yeah, you have a negative thought and they say, oh, that sucks. Right? So then you have a negative thought about negative thought. Or you're afraid and then you're afraid of fear. Right? So it becomes convoluted, and what it all adds up to is what we call neurosis. Neurosis is the common mental illness of humanity. And the definition of neurosis is when you're involved in craziness and you think the craziness is true. That's neurosis, which means when you're involved in thinking. See, once you're involved in thinking, that's neurotic. Why? Because when you're involved with thinking, the first thing that gets thought in thinking is that you're who you think you are. The first thing that gets thought in thinking is that you're who you think you are. Once that's in place, you're crazy. You're crazy because you're thinking that you're something that doesn't exist. That's actually a lot worse than neurotic. It's psychotic, isn't it? Isn't psychosis meaning that you're not in touch with reality, right? Well, how far away from reality do you have to be to think that you're something that doesn't exist? That's about as psychotic as you can get, right? But no, it's not psychotic, because in the world we live in, since we're all psychotic, nobody's psychotic. Right?
Except the same people.
Yeah, but they keep quiet. They're smart enough not to say anything. It's important to understand. We're not talking about becoming depersonalized. You know what I mean? Where you can't experience yourself as a person. That's depersonalization, right? No, we're talking about simply seeing things as they are. Simply seeing that you're the awareness of everything, not anything in that awareness. That's what you're seeing, right? And that's not depersonalization, because you still accept the idea that being a person is part of the way you exist in the world, right? But you know that's not what you are. You're the awareness of that. The word persona means mask. Yeah. So one of the things I say about Halloween is when we had the thing on, I think it was Halloween night. Did we have a Halloween night meeting here? I don't know. But I said, don't worry about taking your mask off, right? Because it's Halloween every day for most of humanity, right? Because we're all wearing these masks, and the thing that makes it really, makes it really scary, right, is that it's not just that we think that we're the person, right? We believe that that's real. That's where it really becomes bad news, right? Because we believe that we're something that doesn't exist, and now we're trying to be happy that way. We're trying to be a happy ghost. They say in Buddhism, they call the typical way that human beings exist hungry ghosts. It's a very good description of a human being, isn't it? Because you don't really exist the way you think you do. That makes you a ghost, right? And you're hungry because you're never satisfied, right? So if you come to see that, I was watching a documentary today on Zen monasteries and how they practice in Japan and so forth. And the teacher there said, the reason that this monastery exists is for people who come to the realization that life as they know it doesn't work. And so now they're interested in, well, is there something else? And then the monastery becomes a place that people can go and learn to meditate and discover not only is there something else, right, but that something else is the truth. And what you thought was true is not real and is not true, right? And if you see this, and if you practice meditation consistently so that you're training your brain. Now we have neuroscience and we have neuroplasticity. So now we have the science that can take it even further than they did in the traditions, right? Because science now says your brain is changing all the time. It is changing in relationship to the way you experience things. So if you continue to experience things in a way where you're anxious and threatened and identified with the physical body and identified with the idea of your being a person, right? Then you're just training your brain over and over. You're practicing being crazy over and over again. The neural patterns will just get deeper and deeper, right? If you practice meditation and you sit here and you move attention out of the thought process, now it's kind of like you've disengaged from the gears and you're in neutral, right? So you're sitting there being still and silent, and the mind now has nobody to play with, right? So it's just unwinding now. So this is a very important part of meditation. It's the stress reduction aspect of it. If you sit there and you take attention away from the process of the mind, which is thinking, right? It starts to unravel. And they talk about this in Buddhism, where they say if you go to the river to get water to drink, when you scoop the water out in a glass, it'll be dirty. You don't want to drink that. So what do? You set the water down and you sit down and wait. That's all you have to do is just sit and wait. And the dirt will go to the bottom of the water and the water will be clean enough to drink. It's the same thing in meditation. You just stop participating with the constant activity of the mind, right? You disengage from the programming and let the program run, but you're not engaging with it anymore. Now, this then becomes a way to live your life. So a lot of people don't understand this meditation practice is a formal practice that is the place you begin to learn how to live a conscious life. So that if you practice consistently, right, the dots start to connect on their own and you start to realize, oh, this is not just about doing some Zen formal meditation. No, this is about how I am being in the world. This is about who I'm being. This is about how I'm interacting with the world. So that when things come up now, I have an awareness of the thought process. I have an awareness of my emotions that I didn't have before. I was identified with them, right? I used to think it was me thinking. But now that I paid attention and I've listened to the teachings, now I notice that it's not me thinking. Thoughts just happen. It's not me having feelings. Feelings just happen. But I can be the awareness of that, not the one who that's happening to. That's the shift, right? I can be the awareness of what's happening, not the one it's happening to. Therefore, the suffering that was happening because you thought you were the one it was happening to stops happening, because you're not the one it's happening to anymore. You're simply the awareness of what's happening. And that awareness is completely unaffected by what happens. This is the keys to the kingdom. The space in this room is a very good analogy for the way you are as awareness. No matter what happens in this room, people can have sex, people can fight, people can start fires, people can change everything any way they want in the room, and the space in this room is never affected by it at all. Never affected by it at all. That's the nature of awareness. And so through these practices, you become familiar with what it's like not to think. You become familiar with what it's like to experience a natural state in which there is peace of mind and happiness. And so where does this happiness come from? It comes from nowhere. Because happiness is a natural experience of your appreciation of the fact that you exist. Isn't it interesting? I mean, if you take this into consideration, it's an amazing fact, right? The most precious aspect of the experience of being a human being, right, is worthless to most of humanity. The most precious aspect of being a human being is what? The fact that you exist, isn't it? Right? But that's worthless. Nobody cares about that. Nobody has to be born, right? Right? Life sucks and then you die. So, but if you practice these practices, you start to experience a natural state of appreciation. You start to experience a natural state of appreciating the fact that you exist. And that becomes a source of happiness. So it doesn't matter what happens, right? It matters that you're here. That's the most important thing. And what happens is not going to have the same effect on you if you experience the truth about who you are, which is awareness itself. But since you're completely conditioned and programmed, you have to practice your way out of it. It's not going to happen by itself. Look at the 6:30 news. It's not going to happen by itself. The majority of humanity is asleep, right? And they're dreaming, and they're sharing the dream, and it's a nightmare. It is, right? It's a nightmare. I mean, if you listen to people talk, which is called complaining, if you listen to people talk, what are they talking about? They're talking about how terrible it is, aren't they? It's like, well, I always have to crack up around my wife because no matter what it is we talk about, she says, in the end, it's awful. I mean, that's the condition in which she sees things. It's awful. No matter what it is, it's awful. Why is it awful? Oh, because of it. And then you go into the story, right? So one of the things that happens through practicing these teachings and this method and meditation is you start to wake up. You start to come out of the dream. You start to realize that awful is what you're causing. It's not the way it actually is. What's happening is not the source of suffering. It's what your mind's doing with it. What is your mind doing with it? Your mind automatically, constantly is running a program called This Isn't It. Isn't it? Constantly running a program, This Isn't It. It's a little too warm in here. The lights should be a little dimmer, you know? When I look in the mirror, this definitely isn't it. Right? And that's what's running all the time. This isn't it. This isn't it. I don't like this. I don't want this. I want something else, right? I either want more of what I want or less of what I don't want. And that's the game. And so I constantly doing that. You can be walking out of here to your car, right? And while you're walking to your car, it's like, oh, that happened. I didn't like that. Oh, I want this. What's for dinner tonight? Am I going to have sex? Right? It's all the time. It's going all the time. So when we practice meditation, we're moving the attention out of that thought process and simply sitting and being still and quiet and being aware of the breath. And then a thought will arise, right? And of course, you'll be pulled into the thought before you realize it. And when you get pulled into the thought, you're pulled into thinking. And when you get pulled into thinking, you're pulled into the story. And when you get pulled into the story, you're being the person again. And when you're being the person again, now you're anxious, right? That all happens like that, by the way. When you go into thinking, all that happens all at once, and you're a person, right? And that's what people complain about as far as practicing meditation, right? Oh, I can't do it. Right? I'm too restless. I can't, my mind's racing. You don't understand. I'm too busy, right? That's the voice in your head running, and all that voice is trying to do is keep you from meditating, because according to that voice, if you succeed in meditating, right, then who you thought you were will die. That's why I called my book, what did I call my book? Dying to Live, which is now out in Audible. It's now out in Audible. And the reason that I called it Dying to Live is because if you understand these teachings and practices, you want to die as soon as possible. You want to die as soon as possible. Because until that you dies, right, you will suffer living the life of that person. And no matter how good you are as a person, you're suffering. I don't care how much money you have. I don't care what how you got it figured out, right? You're still suffering because you'll never be satisfied. It'll never be enough. We walk around, those of us who are just peons and don't have the millions of dollars, we walk around with maintaining this idea that if we had that money, we'd be happy, right? But in order to maintain that idea, you have to ignore the truth, which is if you look at the people that have that money, really look at them, they're not happy. No, they're worried. They're worried about the money, right? And the way they strategize, to deal with being afraid of and worrying about the money is, if I get more, I won't have to worry. But how about when you get $200 billion and you're still nervous? That's right. Everything is for sale. So there are people who believe that meditation is about using visualizations to visualize yourself as a millionaire, and by doing that, you'll eventually become a millionaire, right? But that's misguided. That's misguided because that's not going to solve anything. That's not going to resolve the real issue. And the real issue is that you're confused. You think things that aren't real are real, right? So when you practice meditation, it's an opportunity to experience the truth. It's an opportunity to experience what's real. And what's real is the awareness, right? The awareness is real. The awareness is what you are. The awareness is stable. The awareness is a ground of being that you can live your life from, that will provide a natural experience of well-being and happiness. Of course, you're going to have to practice that because you're not conditioned to do it. You're going to have to practice that until your brain gets rewired sufficiently, right, that it becomes a new channel. See, when your brain gets rewired sufficiently, there's a new channel there, and that channel is always there. You see, the channel is always there anyway, because all of your life, no matter where you were, no matter what you were doing, awareness was always there, wasn't it? Yeah, you weren't aware of awareness, but it was there, right? It's always there, right? So now by practicing meditation with consistency over time, right? That's what this class is about, by the way, establishing a meditation practice. Right? Not just doing it occasionally, right? Not just having it be a curiosity. No. To understand, this is about establishing a practice so that you do it consistently, and by doing it consistently, that which you were ignoring, called ignorance, that which you were ignoring starts to become present. The awareness that you weren't aware of starts to become what you're aware of. And it becomes a consistent channel. So now you can walk around, now you can drive your car in traffic, and the person in front of you cuts you off, right? The brain will click in, right? It'll pull up the annoyance. It'll run the thoughts. Oh, that asshole cut me off, right? But now you, as the awareness, are watching it. You're not being that person. You're watching that happen now, and you have say-so about it. You can see it happen, and if you practice this, one of the things that I found to be the case is not only do you see it happen, but you can actually start laughing. You can actually smile like, this is ridiculous. I used to believe this shit, right? So you can see that happen, and then you know that you have the power to direct your attention away from the crazy stuff. That's what you're doing when you're practicing meditation. Move your attention away from thinking. You can't be upset unless you're thinking. Unless you're thinking. Try it, test it out, right? Have a situation occur that causes you to feel angry, right? That happens to all of us every day at some point, right? And when that happens, move your attention to the breath and just hold it on the breath and see if you're still angry. You can't do it. You can't be angry without thinking angry thoughts. Anger may get stimulated and come up, right? You don't have any say-so about that, right? But once it comes up, you have say-so about what happens next. Do you stay angry? Or do you see it for what it is, right? Okay, yeah. I got triggered, anger came up, I saw it, okay. And now I don't resist it, I don't try and control it, I don't try and get rid of it. I experience the anger, and it disappears, right? And see, one of the things the system does that really kills human beings is it protects you from your own emotions. So if you have an angry feeling come up, right, and you have a strong superego, you have an angry feeling come up, but you don't want to get angry, you don't want to hurt anybody, right? So the system stuffs that energy down, right? Now you have repressed anger in your body, right? And if you do that long enough, it's called cancer. Because the cells, the energy that you suppress, the cellular energy that you suppress is now being pushed into other cells. It's just contracting and contracting, right? Until the cells, the healthy cells, start eating the other cells. And that's called cancer. All you have to do is see there is no body, there is no person, right? And when you see things as they are, that's the way it is. That's just the way it is.
Well, I'm starting to admire these non-dualists that you had mentioned to us, these pure guys that just look at everything as happening. Because it's a very simple philosophy,
Yeah, but it's not pure guys looking at everything that's happening. No, they're not being anybody. They're nothing.
Right.
But that distinction has to be in there. They're nothing. Awareness is nothing. They're being nothing. They're knowing nothing, right? The only true statement you can make about knowledge is that I don't know. That's the only true statement you can make about knowledge, right? Because what knowledge is you just name something, and now we know what that is, right? You didn't know what that was, but when you learn the word chair, now you know what that is. And we just do that to everything, and now we think we know something, but we don't know anything. We don't know any more than we did before we learned it was a chair. But now we think we do, and we operate as if we know something, but we don't know anything. So one of the questions that is the foundation of these practices and teachings is, who am I, right? We talk about self-inquiry, who am I? The only honest answer to that question will ever be is, I don't know. That's the only honest answer to that question. You can never know. Why? Because what we are is non-conceptual. What we are can't be spoken about. The truth can't be spoken about. That's what makes this so difficult, right? Because we have to sit here telling lies, right? And if you think the lies are the truth, you're not getting out of the conceptual understanding of the whole thing. That's why in meditation, we're sitting and being silent. Silence is the truth. Silence is the truth. So this is important to know. That's why when you walk into a meditation hall, if you're practicing Zen, the first thing you do when you walk into the hall, you're humbling yourself. You're saying, I don't know anything. I'm here to experience the truth. That's what this is all about, right? And and if you're egotistical enough, you can't do that. Somebody will say, I'm not bowing, you know. When Ram Dass met his guru in India, if you're not familiar with the Ram Dass story, you should check it out, right? Very interesting. He's a psychologist, right, and everything, had his degrees, and he went to meet this guru in India because he heard that this guru was experiencing what him and Timothy Leary experienced on LSD, but he didn't take any LSD, right? And so he wanted to find out, is there a way to have that experience of consciousness without LSD? So he was brought to this guru, and the guru was laying on the ground, and he goes over, and the guy that brought him there bows to the guru and goes over and kisses the guru's feet. So, Ram Dass said, not me, buddy. I'm not kissing nobody's feet, I'm a psychologist, right? So then the guru called him over, and he said, yeah, last night you were looking at the stars, and you were thinking about your mother who was ill. And it was true. And then he bowed down, right? So, but do people who are clear and awake and alive, do they have to play parlor games with you to get you to accept reality, right? So that was the beginning of his spiritual life, of Ram Dass's spiritual life, and he lived the rest of his life writing spiritual books and teaching spirituality, right? But what he was exposed to is available to you and I. This is the thing you have to understand, right? This is not, in the business of spirituality, if it's the real deal, there's no hierarchy. There is there is nobody above anybody. We're all on the same level, right? One of the ways that you can tell a true teacher is they see you as the same way they see themselves. There's no difference, right? It's all it's about. They call it in Buddhism a bodhisattva. A bodhisattva is a term in Buddhism that means this person is awake, and part of being awake is you naturally want to share what you discovered with other people. And that's a teacher, but it's not somebody who sees themselves as better than anybody else. That's the real deal. Any other questions before we cut this? So come to class on a regular basis, right? Because here's where you'll get the stimuli, to establish a practice.
Would you say your Audible book is YouTube or Audible?
It's on audible.com, or if you go to Amazon, where the book is shown on Amazon now, it shows paperback, ebook, and Audible. It's all right there.
Where do you listen to the Audible?